Welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm Kathleen Walter. With us now via the phone is Newsmax insider, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and fellow at the Manhattan Institute, Judy Miller. And Judy, welcome back. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Well, as you know, more than 100 people were killed in clashes across Egypt in a violent crackdown on protesters by Egypt's military-backed government. The protesters were demanding the return of Mohamed Morsi as president. Meantime, we've learned Egypt's vice president al-Baradei has resigned. What do you make of these developments?
This is an organization that feels, and in this case with some legitimacy, that the duly elected president of Egypt, the first truly democratically elected president in modern times, was ousted. They were not going to give in. They had sat in at a major square in the capital and at other places throughout the country, and the people in this instance, and this is the difference from 1956, the people of Egypt were demanding that the military take action, break up these encampments, send the Muslim Brotherhood back to their homes and their jobs, and get on with life in Egypt. And that's what's happened now. I don't know whether or not they will succeed, but this clash was virtually inevitable, despite the resignation of Mohamed al-Baradei, who declared that he didn't want anything to do with the killing and that this confrontation wasn't necessary. But most Egyptians think that it was inevitable.
To what extent, though, is this an indication that Egypt is departing from its path toward democracy?
Look, I think when you talk about democracy in Egypt or in any of the Arab Spring countries, you're talking about a work in progress. Most people feel that Mohamed Morsi was actually destroying the prospects for a democratic future, in that he was not respecting the minority rights of the Christians, of secular groups that opposed with him, and that he was trying to establish Islamic laws and norms as the de facto rule of the land. He was trying to push people out of the bureaucracy who opposed the MB. In other words, the Egyptian people and opponents of the regime, of the Morsi government, were accusing him of trying to stage, in other words, a soft coup. The military finally reacted. I was in Egypt in April, and there were a chorus of complaints about the Morsi government, the fact that the economy was absolutely collapsed, that there were no jobs, there was no prospect of economic growth. People were demanding that the army stepped in. Finally, it did in the summer, and now the Muslim Brotherhood refused to accept this verdict and camped out. So this is where we are. I think that democracy, you cannot have democracy without respect for law, without respect for human rights, without respect for the minority views of your countrymen. That democracy is too often defined in the West as just elections. Egypt was not democratic under Mohamed Morsi. It's certainly not democratic under its current emergency military government with civilian-appointed leaders, but at least what we now have is more in keeping with Egypt's tradition, whether or not people like it or not. This kind of military-backed civilian rule is very much in keeping with what we've had in Egypt in the past 50 years.
Judy, do you see a parallel between Egypt and Syria? Are there concerns that this could turn into a full-scale civil war?
There are those concerns. We don't know. We know that today the fighting seems to be over. The military has gone in and has burned down the tents and the encampment where the Islamists and the pro-Morsi supporters were staying. But we don't know what the what the Muslim Brotherhood's next act is going to be. I mean, will they try and establish encampments someplace else? Will they resort to even greater violence to persuade the military that they will not make a deal until President Morsi is released? We don't know what their plan B is going to be, but we do know that for the moment, what has gone on now for the past several weeks, which is a large part of Egypt being controlled by people who were camped in the streets of the city and refusing to leave. That part's over. I don't think they're going to be able to do that in that part of Cairo again. So this is one small tactical victory for the military and its civilian-appointed government, but we don't know what lies ahead. The resignation of Mohammed Baradei was predicted, I think, and predictable. This is a Nobel Prize winner, after all, for peace, and he believed, he's been saying now in Arabic broadcasts, that he believed there was a peaceful way to solve this. Most people think there wasn't a peaceful way to solve it, that the military had a choice. You could either go in and do what the military soldiers did today and the police, or you could establish a cordon around those encampments and starve out people. But either way, it was going to be ugly and violent.
Last question for you, Judy. In response to the crackdown today, White House Deputy Press Secretary Josh Earnest said the U.S. strongly condemns the crackdown and will keep up the pressure on Egyptian leaders to begin a transition to democracy. How do you view the Obama administration's response to this?
I think the most important statement is what the Obama administration did not say. And that is, they did not say they were going to cut off aid to Egypt or that the nature of the relationship with Egypt would change. You didn't hear either of those two things from the White House spokesman, and I think that indicates that despite the denunciation of what was done today, the United States understands that it has a long-term stake in not only the survival of this military-backed civilian government, but also the restoration of peace and security in Egypt. Egypt is Israel's first and most longest-standing peace partner. Peace talks have just begun between Israelis and Palestinians in Jerusalem. This is a very bad time to be distracted and to lose focus on America's strategic interests in the survival and prosperity of Egypt. And therefore, I think the Obama administration's lack of significant action indicates what its real policy is as opposed to its rhetorical denunciation today.
All right, Judy Miller, thanks for being with us today, and thank you for your insight.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.